Word. Hang on, I gotta click a button here. Okay. And then I want to do this. And then I want to do share. Okay, there we are.
Okay.
Let me do this. Wait, hang on. Okay. There we go. Okay, so see up on the screen, everybody see that okay? Does this work okay doing the PowerPoints instead of all the handouts and like that? Because I can use pictures and I've got Bible verses up here so that we can, so that we can read along. Anyway, we're starting a new lesson, a series of lessons on the crucifixion. Okay, it's that time of year, isn't it? Christmas is over. Well, today Christmas will be will be over. So here's the thing, is that let me get my thing here. Back at the moon landing, July 20th, 1969. Everybody remember where you were? Yeah. And watching, everybody watched it. I mean, Janet and I watched it. We were in our first year of being married, and we watched it in our first apartment. And that was what Richard Nixon had come out and said after the moon landing. He said, "This is the greatest day since creation." I mean, it was a big deal. Yeah, like that. But he said, "This is the greatest day since creation." But Billy Graham came out same day and said, "No, there were three greater days: the crucifixion, Good Friday, Easter for the resurrection, and the first Christmas." So he told him. Now, anyway, so the crucifixion is really, really important. I was telling someone the other day, it seems like we get to Holy Week and we wait for Holy Week, and then we race through Holy Week to get to the resurrection, to get to Easter Sunday. And we skip over all of that stuff that happened in Holy Week and look at it in detail, because what you'll get is on Good Friday, you get 20 minutes on the crucifixion, and that's the end of the crucifixion, because it's time to move on to bigger and better things. And it's the crucifixion where everything happened. Okay, that's where all of Christ's work, was done. It was at the crucifixion. So, let me see here. In fact, let me see if I can move our faces a little bit. I'll get gooder at this as we go on. But yeah. Anyway, so the moment Christ died on the cross, all the sins of mankind, past, present, and future, were paid for, forgiven. The work was done. Jesus said, "It is finished." Okay, that's pretty important. That's pretty important stuff. Okay. Now, as it's going through your head, you go, "Wait a minute," because people say, "Well, not everybody's saved. Not everybody's going to heaven." Okay. But the work's been done. It's how we apply it as to whether or not we receive it. But there's nothing that we do for our salvation except for believe, to accept the free gift that Christ has given. This is what's really hard for people to understand, and you can be mad at me too, is that there will be forgiven people in hell, because the forgiveness has happened. The crucifixion happened. They've rejected it. They haven't received it. Whatever it might be. Okay, is that those people that end up in hell were forgiven people. So the crucifixion's that important. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? I mean, anybody have any thoughts on the crucifixion itself? Or I was going to say, what's your experience with crucifixion? But probably nothing. Like that. But I mean, do you agree it's important? I mean, it's an important thing. Okay. Now I wanted to show you some, I'm sorry, what? Oh, I thought somebody said something. Okay, I want to show you. So I'll show you my work. These are the books that pretty much I've been going through to get what we're going to, because we're going to go all the way till Easter, at least to Easter, on this. Maybe we'll keep going and won't get to the resurrection until Christmas. We'll just be out of sync for seasons like that. But this book here, it's called The Crucifixion of the King of Glory by Eugenia Scalisi, um, what's her name? Konstantinos. She's a Greek Orthodox lady. Her husband's a Greek Orthodox priest. She's a professor. She's a lawyer and a professor. She used to teach at University of San Diego, which oddly enough is a Roman Catholic. Yeah, Roman Catholic university. But anyway, she's pretty smart on this stuff like that. So, and I've listened to a lot of her, she's got her teachings online on this topic, on a whole bunch of topics and that. But anyway, so I use that book. I use this one here. It's called The Crucifixion, Understanding the Death of Jesus Christ by Fleming Rutledge. Now, this lady's a hoot. She's an Anglican pastor, an Anglican priest. I don't know if she still does. I don't know if she still does that, but she's a teacher. She's a writer. I've got probably maybe 7 of her books. I don't know, she's in her late 80s now, and like I say, she still teaches. She still writes. She's like, I think she's from the South. I think she is in South Carolina right now, but she's got this strong Southern accent, and but she's really something. And then I've got here, this is called The Murder of Jesus. This is by John MacArthur. John MacArthur is a big evangelical pastor in Southern California. Tremendous teacher. It's just you got to pick and choose what it is that, that we as Lutherans can accept, from him. Like that. But on this, he does a very good job. The subtitle there says, that, you've seen the Passion of the Christ. Now, I can't read it, it's a little small. Now discover what it means to you. And this is important because it is not to what it means to you, and then it means something else to you. I mean, to us, what does it mean? It's not just something that happened in history, but we don't have to glean any, memory or not memory, anything good out of it. It's for us. And the last one's called The Passion of Jesus Christ by John Piper. He's a Baptist. He's a Baptist minister, but the book is it's the 50 reasons why Jesus came to die. Okay, so and that's what his whole book is. He's got these 50 reasons. But I just wanted to show you that it's a topic that gets written about a lot, gets written extensively. That one by Fleming Rutledge, the Southern lady, is 850 pages. The Greek Orthodox one is like 350, and the others are, a couple hundred. But I mean, a lot's been written. And it's not just when we think crucifixion, we think of Jesus hanging on the cross, but it's all that process and how, when it starts and where it goes. So I've got here, I go, how, why are we beginning a long series on the crucifixion of Jesus? What do we have today? We had the 3 wise men. Y'all do realize there was probably more than 3, right? There was probably a whole army of them. We think of 3 because they brought 3 gifts. And because the song said 3 about the 3 wise men, like that. But there was probably a whole host of, what they were there for. But anyway, but here we are. We just had the birth of Christ. We have the Epiphany coming up. We're on the 12th day of Christmas today. In case you wondered, today's the 12th day of Christmas. And what do we get? I was gonna look it up, but I forgot. What'd you say? A partridge in a pear tree? That's what we say for all of them because we don't know. But anyway, but today is the last day of Christmas. That's a good time to get into the crucifixion. Okay, but anyway, this says, I got here, Jesus speaks of Christmas, kind of, during his trial before Pontius Pilate. So that's happening. You've all seen the picture of out on the balcony of Pontius Pilate standing there with Jesus. I should have put up a picture of it, and he's asking him, "Are you a king?" And what is truth? And then he washes his hands over the whole matter. But Jesus says in that exchange there, Pilate says to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world to bear witness to the truth." So he's saying the whole reason that he was born
Mhm.
wasn't so that we could have Christmas carols and a little baby in a manger and all the things that Jesus did. It was for this moment to be crucified. Okay. Um, and for truth, everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And Pilate said to him, what is truth? So that's a big thing there. Also, we had Master's Men on Friday, the hymn that we sang. Deacon Dennis hands out the little hymn sheets, and as a group, we chase everybody out of IHOP by singing, you know. But the hymn was, "What child is this?" I'm always looking for this stuff. I'm always looking what I can use for a class somewhere down the line. But in the second half of the second stanza, the song, "What child is this who lay to rest on Mary's lap is sleeping," all that. Okay. The second half of the second stanza, it says, "Nails, spear shall pierce him through, the cross be borne for me and for you." So we even sing about the crucifixion. I mean, we don't even let baby Jesus get very far before we say, "By the way, you know, let me prophesy over you, child." Okay. But the crucifixion's right there. I mean, at least for the hymn writers, it's seen right there in the birth of Christ. Let me check online, see if anybody's got anything. Ray, I know you'll have stuff, so just kind of shout it out as you go along, because I don't look up often. Okay. I gave you a handout. Um, for those of you online, I attached it with the with the thing. Janet, if you wanted it, I left it on my desk as soon as you walk in the office. But anyway, I've got about Isaiah 53. I don't have this up on the screen. Gave you something because I knew you'd want to have something to scribble notes all over. But Isaiah 53, 3 through 10, and I've got it titled "The Sin-Bearing Messiah." And that's a big thing. But as we go through this is what the Jews missed in reading their Old Testament, what their expectation was for Messiah. They all believed Messiah. They all believed Messiah was coming. Okay, and they have all these prophecies. But what they always see is the conquering king. Like for those of you who are in Revelation, in chapter 19, the Master's Men, we talked about the rider on the white horse, with the sword coming out of his mouth and the flames and, this, that. They see that Messiah in the Old Testament. Okay. But they missed in Isaiah 53 what it says here. And it says, and this prophecy goes back into chapter 52. Also starts midway through 52 and goes midway through 53. But I just have this portion here for us. It says, "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not." Remember, this is Isaiah writing like 700 years before Jesus. He says, "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed." All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to slaughter, and like a sheep that is before its shearers is silent. So he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgressions of my people. And they made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death, although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him. He has put him to grief when his soul makes an offering for guilt, and he shall see his offspring. He shall prolong his days, and the will of the Lord shall prosper his hand. This is the suffering servant. This is the suffering Messiah, and this is the Jesus that we see in the Gospels, I mean, at least in the end, that passion part of what, he took, where he was beaten, where he was unrecognizable, that the people thought that God was punishing him because surely he had done something wrong, and not that he was being punished for their sin. Now, Ray had a comment yesterday. He called me and tell me if I tell your story right, Ray. But anyway, he'd run across a teaching where the guy was saying, no, this isn't talking about Jesus. Okay. And I interrupted him when I said, I know what he's going to say is that they think that Isaiah was talking about Israel, that Israel was the suffering servant. And that's the view of the Jews today. Okay. But grammatically, it can't be true because it talks about how he suffered for us. Well, who's the us if we're the he? So anyway, what I think happened, okay, and this is me, is that the Jews believed that Isaiah spoke of the Messiah. Not speaking of Jesus, because they didn't have a name for him, back in those days, but that was about Messiah. After the time of Jesus, and and there was come a point where the Christians weren't treating the Jews very well too, because I think that they changed their position on it to say that it was not Jesus, that the suffering servant must be Israel. The suffering servant's mentioned 4 times in Isaiah. One time it's talking about Cyrus, the one who let the Jews go back to Jerusalem after the Babylonian, captivity. Anyway, but I'm just saying there's different views on that. But however, and we don't have time to go into a deep study on Isaiah 53, but the idea is just to know 700 years before Jesus, this is already being spoken of. And you can go through and you can look at the different, things, that it says about him. And you can go back into, I'm sorry? Oh, somebody was coughing. Okay, so my last line on the slide that's up there says the crucifixion is in the nativity scene when we're reading about the hymn. So let's move on. So here's where we are. We had done an extensive study on the life of Christ, okay, and then we took a break. We got to a certain point, we took a break. And then we did the Jewish holidays. We went through all the fall holidays, even went through extras, and ended up last week talking about Hanukkah. The last 2 weeks, we spoke about Hanukkah, and we talked about that intertestamental period, the time between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. You have that 400 years, of silence, but things are happening. Historically, things are happening, and that's where the Maccabees came up, and as far as they had to fight off Antiochus the Fourth, the Syrians and that who were trying to destroy their religion and all that. Uh, anyway, but when we left off on the Mount of Transfiguration. Okay, that was our last study in the life of Christ, and I cut it off there because I think it's important that it starts a new section of the Gospels. I have later here, I got a slide that says that there's, all the Gospels are broken up into two sections. One is the prologue, and the second portion is Passion Week. And Passion Week, 35 to 40% of the Gospels is the last week of Jesus's life on earth. Okay? That's a whole bunch. Everything else before that's just prologue, telling the story, who Jesus is, how he came about, what his purposes are, about him feeding people, about him doing miracles, about why the people are so mad at him all the time. So, but that's just prologue. Okay. So at Luke 9, they're coming down from the Mount of Transfiguration, okay? And it says, but while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to his disciples, let these words sink into your ears. That should be the heading for everything before the red letters come and Jesus said something. Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. Okay? See, there's that change there. Like from doing all this stuff, now he's announcing, I'm going to be handed over to the bad guys. And we're only in Luke 9. And he's already talking about this. But then it says in verse 45, it says, but they did not understand this saying, and it was concealed from them so that they might not perceive it. And they were afraid to ask him about the saying. You got a picture of this. I mean, sometimes the Gospels are really kind of comical. Here Jesus says something really clear. I mean, hey, the time is coming to be delivered up to the bad guys. And they don't understand, we better not ask them. I mean, they could have at that time said, could you explain that to me? Could you explain that clearer? But they didn't. They're still trying to figure this out. We're 2,000 years later. We've read the Bibles a bunch of times. We've sat through a bunch of classes and sermons and all. These guys are hearing this stuff for the first time and they're going, say what? And that's pretty much what they're doing. So, and then I got here a little bit later, a couple of verses down, in verse 51, he says, when the days grew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. It's like he's resigned now to whatever else I've been doing. I'm going to Jerusalem. That's where the work is going to be. That's where the work is going to be done. In John 12, we have something similar. Now, you got to remember the way the Gospels are written. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptic Gospels, they all contain kind of the same stories. They may have used each other as references and stuff like that. That goes pretty much in a linear, order. So one thing happens and the next thing happens. We get to John chapter 12. John writes a little bit more by themes. Okay, where he'll pick out a theme and maybe those next couple of chapters will be in that theme. Then another thing. They don't necessarily go in order. But in John 12, we find this small comment I've got. It says, now among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. We don't know who these Greeks are. And Greeks are the Gentiles. Greeks are the non-Jewish people. He says, so they came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and they asked him, sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip went and told Andrew, and Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. And Jesus answered them, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Okay? And this is a big deal because previously what did Jesus say, all the time when people would kind of figure out, that he was something special or whatever, he'd say, don't tell anybody, but now he's making this kind of a public, he's making this kind of a public thing. The reason I'm going through this is just to show you that there's this change in going through just the gospel stories into now we're going to Passion Week, even though we may be 5 chapters away from Passion Week. But everything he's doing from that point on is to fulfill that. This is what I said before. Each of the 4 gospels are divided into 2 parts: prologue, Passion Week. 35 to 40% of the gospel accounts cover the last week of Jesus's life. So, any questions? Am I missing anybody? Ray.
What was the purpose of Jesus is telling these people, don't say anything to anybody about what's going on, but yet he revealed himself to the Samaritan woman long before that, and she wasn't told to keep quiet, and she went around to the whole town and brought them up there so that they could hear his words. And they also came away saying, now we believe, not so much from what you told us, but what we have seen and heard ourselves.
Right. I think a lot. I think a lot of that. Well, we don't know. Jesus doesn't tell us why he tells somebody something and somebody else, something else. But the Samaritan woman was going to go talk to Samaritans. Samaritans were. If you remember when we covered John chapter 4, and we talked about, this incident, the Samaritans were kind of the left out people. They were kind of like the half breeds. They were half Jew, they were half Gentile. When the northern kingdom was taken away into captivity by Assyria in 722 BC, we all have that on our calendar. No, like that, what was left in the land were some Jews, but the 10 northern tribes were all taken away. And then the Assyrians repopulated with their people, who ended up by intermarrying with the Jewish people that were left over in the land. So that's where the Samaritans came from. So like I say, they're kind of like the half-breeds. The Jews don't like them. The Gentiles don't like them. And so that's who this woman was, the woman at the well. She was the Samaritan woman. And I think Jesus, I got to look at Ray. I'm starting to think who's that. Anyway, so the Samaritan woman is the one who's asking these questions. And so I think Jesus is trying to make her be able to go speak to her people so that they can feel a part of the Jewish life. If you remember, we worship on Mount Gerizim or whatever it was, and you worship on Mount Moriah. Who's got the right mountain to worship on and all. I got Jesus bringing that through. With the Jews, when he's talking to his disciples, and or even the people that he healed and stuff like that, he's not ready for the Jews to hear the message yet. Like that. So at least that's the best I can come up with.
So what you're saying is that in modern day, it would be like Jesus going to the Amish. It's not like they're going to get on Facebook, right?
Did you say the Amish?
Yeah, the Amish.
Okay, yeah, because they're going to be quiet. That's what you're talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to spread very far.
Yeah. Like I say, we don't know. Yeah. In fact, well, I don't know. Anything I'd say beyond that, I'd be making up. And okay. I criticize people for doing that. So, okay, let's move on. This is all in a way of introductory stuff, okay? Oops, let me see what I got here. What's here? Wait a minute, did I skip something there? Oh, I was going to talk about importance here. The importance of Passion Week with Jesus. And you look at the creeds, okay? Yeah, and you guys know what the creeds are. I mean, we said the Nicene Creed today, and it said these words in it. But the creeds are just summaries of the way that the early church decided to concisely say what we believe. And that's all a creed is. I believe. That's all that creed, the word creed means and stuff like that. But what was important? They could have said, and Jesus who fed the 5,000 and filled Peter's boat with the 153 fishes and all that. But it said about his life, it says he came down from heaven. He was made man. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered, and he was buried, and he's risen. That's the important stuff to the early church of what it meant, or that we needed to know about Jesus. Yeah. So, anybody know why Pontius Pilate's mentioned there? You know, there's only two people mentioned in that. Well, there's three in the creeds: Jesus, Mary. You could kind of say the Holy Spirit, and Pontius Pilate. Anybody know why Pontius Pilate's mentioned in the creed? No? That's what I'm here for. Catch you on those things you never thought about before. He's a historical marker. Okay. In fact, I think I may have that on the next slide. Let me see. Yeah, he's a historical marker, a time and a place in history that you can say this stuff happened. Okay. That Jesus is not a myth, because all this happened under Pontius Pilate. He could have just said, you know, he suffered, was crucified, and died, and was buried. But in the creed, they thought it was important enough to throw in the Pontius Pilate part. Anyway, same thing. That's the way Luke, opens up his gospel, where he talks about, the day of the census and Caesar Augusta and when Quirinius was the governor, and, he's placing all this stuff. So, because you look at all the other religious people, they don't have a history behind them. Okay? Because the important part about Jesus Christ is who he is. It's not what he taught. What he taught's important, but it's who he is. That he was the Son of God, sent from heaven to die, for our sins. So it's a historical type of religion. Got here this summary statement. In fact, this came from that Fleming Rutledge. Said the crucifixion is the touchstone of Christian authenticity, the unique factor by which everything else, including the resurrection, is given its true significance. It's only in light of the crucifixion, the fact that Jesus was crucified. Otherwise, he would be like any other wise man, religious leader, whatever, just comes on the scene, passes off his teachings and disappears from the scene. But the fact that the crucifixion is there is what makes it important. But where she says there, including the resurrection, like I said earlier, all the work's done on Good Friday. All the work's done on Good Friday. I shouldn't say the only thing that the resurrection does, because the resurrection is important. But the resurrection gives us the proof that what was done at the crucifixion is true and effective. So, but they go together, because if there was no resurrection, then how would you know? It could still all be done, but we wouldn't know, And I think in the creed, it says, when it talked about crucified for you under Pontius Pilate, or for us, I forget which way it does it. So that'd be that one. I've got this here. I found this interesting. Somebody said this. The history of sin concludes with the greatest sin, the crucifixion of Jesus. I mean, you go through all the history of sin in the Bible, starting with Adam and Eve and the serpent and Cain and Abel and what else? All the people in Noah's day and whatever all the sins are. In the book of Judges, how many times does it come around and it says, but they did what was right in their own eyes. And then God sent them a rescuer, bring them back into fellowship with himself. And then a couple of lines later, it says, but then the people did what was right in their own eyes. So you got all this sin. And then here you got the guy who's come to take care of the issue of sin, and people do one more sin on him, and have him crucified. So,
Hey, Gene,
yes, sir.
is that why Jesus said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do"?
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Well, I guess I want to nuance it a little bit because I don't want anybody to say, well, it's not my fault because I didn't know what I was doing. I was a crazy man, like that. But yeah, but that's the point that he's making. He's saying, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know who they're crucifying. Uh, they just don't know, you know. We think, here's the thing. We think that if we were back there, we wouldn't do what they did. And we probably would, because you got to put yourself in their mindset, their history, what they were going through. Again, we have 2,000 years of hindsight and teaching and just time to ponder on it. But at the time, you know, we'd probably do the same thing. Yeah. So did that answer you, Ray?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's things that we need to talk about as we go through the study, okay? And we'll cover all these things and we'll cover much, much more. But the Jewish people versus the Jewish leaders, how much of a difference, is there in those people? All the Jewish leaders hated Jesus. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus seem to come around. They seem to be a little bit more sensible. And I think through contact with Jesus and the disciples, they probably saw the light. But all the other Jewish leaders, they just wanted him dead, gone, whatever. The Jewish people, on the other hand, they seem to like him. I mean, you can read all the stories about the healings and especially, hey, he fed them, when he fed the 5,000, they go, hey, this is good stuff. I got. But then again, also, they were the ones staying to crucify him, at the end. So it's hard but we'll get into that. Who was who in that? What happened when Jesus died? I mean, he died for a purpose. Things happen. That's why I said with that John Piper book, he's got 50 reasons why Jesus died for us. Like that. Because, I mean, something actually happened on the cross. It wasn't just that we say, okay, well, we have a dead Savior, so we'll take that to mean this. Things actually happened, but we'll get into what those were. Why did Jesus die? A lot of people will say, why did God have to kill Jesus to forgive our sins? Why didn't he just wave a magic wand? It says in one of the Peter passages says God desires that all come to salvation. Well, if God desired that, why did he say, what the heck? What do you guys know? And I'll forgive you and you're done. Why do you have to kill? Why do you die? What were the messianic expectations of the people back then? We've all heard a lot of the messianic prophecies and all that, but what were the people actually expecting? I mean, we talked about that a little bit between whether they were expecting a suffering servant or, the rider on the white horse to come in and lop the head off all the Romans. And the big thing is, why was there
Being a conquering.
Pardon?
They were expecting a conqueror.
Right. No, no. Well, I'm saying that's what the messianic expectations were, but what should they have been? Or what were they even before those people? How did they miss? Like we say, we read the Isaiah 53. How did they miss that?
Yeah. Hey, Gene,
Right. Yeah.
a question for you. Was blasphemy punishable by death?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was. So anybody claiming to be God was automatically going to be stoned to death or crucified.
Well, you know what? It probably depends on how big of a stink they raised and if anybody believed him. Obviously, Jesus was a thorn in their flesh, and so they accused him of blasphemy because they knew that that would take place. Hey, you got to remember, in Jewish culture, disobeying your parents got you stoned. I mean, so Joe.
Yeah, that's the point. Who determined what blasphemy was? And it's kind of like the same situation that we have today in Christianity between all the multiple denominations. I refer to it as a smorgasbord Christianity. You accept that which fits your philosophy and you reject that which doesn't. And you can't do that. You either take God's word as the inerrant, infallible word of God.
Right. Right. But as far as what's blasphemy, I think that there are certain things that are laid out that are blasphemous. And the only thing that they ever accused Jesus of was that you claim to be God. They never questioned his miracles and said, hey, you're doing those miracles and we think only God can do those miracles. They didn't do any of that. It was his claims to be God. So they were pretty specific.
But again, see, they're totally ignoring the divinity of the miracles.
No.
It's the concept of this smorgasbord belief. I accept what fits my agenda or my concept, philosophy, and I reject everything else.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that they actually believe. In fact, that what they said about the miracles wasn't that you were doing it for God. They claimed you were doing it because of the devil. Yeah. So, but see, that's the thing though. But when he did things that made him to be God, that's what got him into trouble. But this one, we've said this before. Jesus says to his disciples, this is going to happen to me, or this is going to do. They've got no clue. The Jews, whenever Jesus opened his mouth, they knew exactly what he was saying. Yeah, they knew. They didn't walk away saying, I wonder what he's talking about. It almost sounded like he was claiming to be God, but he wouldn't have done. No, they knew exactly. And so when they bring him, we'll get to the different trials. When they bring him before the different leaders of the trials, they specifically say why they're bringing him. They're not, there's no doubt. And I'm sure that Jesus is standing there. And if he wasn't standing there silent like a lamb on his way to slaughter, he would have said, yeah, I did say that. Yep, I said that one too. Yeah, you caught me there, didn't you? But that's the way he did. Who had a hand up? Oh, Joe.
That circles all the way back around to your original question. Why did they kill Jesus? And you're saying they thought Jesus was powered by the devil. Well, the answer to that is the devil made me do it.
There you go. The devil made me do it. But anyway, the number 5 there, that's the big one. Why was there always so much conflict over the person of Jesus? I mean, everybody was stirred up by him. Yeah. But then you had people that really liked him, but they wouldn't necessarily stand up for him. I mean, I'll give you a preview, and I think I said this maybe last week, or maybe I was speaking to people individually, is what is the beginning of Passion Week that we normally see as the beginning of Passion Week? What's the first day of Passion Week? Pardon?
Just coming in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I say it's before that. I say that they were primed for that, and I go back to the raising of Lazarus from the dead. because the people marveled over that. It says, you can read it in John 12, I think it is. Talks about him being with Mary and Martha, and they're serving, and it talks about, and Lazarus was there, whom Jesus had raised. So this is after he raised him. Jesus is there having dinner with them all, and people they hear about Jesus, and they want to go see him. But they've also heard about Lazarus. They want to go see him. And Lazarus is there at the table reclining, one of those guys who's reclining with Jesus. I mean, he's out doing the clubs and all that after he's been raised from the dead. We don't think about that. We miss that in there. If you've ever read it before, we see that he raised Lazarus from the dead. He said, come out of the grave. Lazarus, come forth. It's all that we ever think about. So you think of this mummy coming out of the grave, and you don't think about him. But it says, no, he was out there. He was having dinner. All the people were coming to see him. They were marveling over Jesus, and they were coming to, and those, I think, are the people who were when Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, that had the palms laid out for him, were worshiping him, saying all the good things. But it also says when the people went to go see Lazarus when he was dining with Jesus, and all of them said they wanted to kill Lazarus. Here the guy's already been dead, got raised, and the Jews want to kill him again. Yeah, those are the kind of things that put the mindset of why there was so much turmoil.
Yeah, in the back to the group of the chosen, this name on television, but they did a really good job, I thought, with that of the showing Lazarus and Jesus and the folks that get together after the raising of Lazarus. Quite frequently.
Yeah, it was almost like he was never gone.
They did a good job.
Yeah. And I've got more here. Things like, why did the veil of the temple tear? What about the darkness and the earthquakes? What about the zombies? Who here knows about the zombies? I mean, the zombie apocalypse. What was that? Matthew 27. What's that?
There's been scary stuff going on.
Why did Judas throw the money into the temple? I mean, did he just have a fit? Or was there a legal reason that he actually did it? Why did Pontius Pilate want to release Jesus? Pontius Pilate wanted to release him. I mean, besides the fact that he didn't think that he had done anything wrong, there's a reason why he did it. There was something happening in Rome at that time that made him end up by killing Jesus, even though he wanted to release him. Who wanted to kill Jesus? And then the question is, who did kill Jesus?
God did.
Well, don't give away the punchline, right? No, but yeah, well, in the end, God did. It said it was for his pleasure, for his doing, for his planning that he did it. But even when we say, well, who killed him? Well, the Romans killed him. I don't know which Romans killed him. I mean, the guys who actually put him on the cross? Or was that the leadership of, Rome? Or did the Jews kill him? They just didn't have the power to actually kill him, so they turned him over. Anyway, those are all the things that those are some of the things that will, go through. Okay.
Dean?
Yes, sir.
Another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can mute him.
Driving my ears.
Yeah.
Okay. Lowell's got his hearing aids on today, so you're kind of loud. I'm turning you down just a shade. Go ahead.
All right. In one of my studies, the individual making the presentation said that Jesus did not speak to the Sanhedrin when he was under trial because their mind was already set, and it was a waste of time and breath to even try to defend himself. But with Pontius Pilate had an open mind, and that's why he spoke to Pontius Pilate and did not speak to the Sanhedrin. Are they correct in that?
Well, I mean, I don't think that he spoke to anybody to defend himself. I mean, like I said earlier, I think that anything that he got accused of, as far as making himself out to be God or the miracles he did or anything like that, I think his response would have just been, yeah. I mean, Yep, that's me.
Mhm.
I think that the thing is that he doesn't think that they're worthy of a response. You know, that they're not. Let me see if I can say this right. I usually don't. Let me see if I can say this right. The whole crucifixion thing is a transaction between Jesus and the Father. Okay, between Jesus and the Father. You know, even when we say that Jesus died on the cross because he loved us, that isn't the reason he died on the cross. He died on the cross to be obedient to the Father.
Mhm.
You know,
John,
that doesn't mean he didn't love us and he didn't do it out of that. But the reason that he did it was in obedience to the Father, and
uh,
that's a
John
big deal.
3:16 says.
What?
That's what John 3:16 says.
I, I know, I know. In some of these cases, I'm biblical. Yeah.
I'm trying to listen to this and just figure in my head, okay, because we said the history of sin concludes with the greatest sin. But then we're also saying it's a transaction between God the Father and the Son. So that I'm just kind of observing out loud, like, how can this be? But it is, it's the greatest sin. I see that, what you're saying. And also
On man's side, it's a
On
great
man's
sin
side.
that we crucified, the Lord. Okay.
It's like,
On God's side, that's the way I get my salvation done. Okay. And that's why it doesn't matter who killed him, because we're in that equation. You know, when we say it was the Romans, it was the Jews, it was God, it was us, because he died, he had to die for our sins,
All of it.
all of us. You know, so everybody's, everybody's guilty like that. But everybody's forgiven. That's what I opened up with. Everybody, as soon as he died on the cross, all the sins of the entire world, past, present, and future, are gone. What does it say that Jesus does with our sin? You know, he casts it as far as the east is from the west. He puts it between his shoulder blades where nobody can get to it. But sinful man still fights against that and rejects the free gift. And that answers that first question as to, all are forgiven, but not all go to heaven. Okay. Okay, that's what I got for today. Anyway, so next week we'll get into more. Everybody online okay? Everybody here okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, well, let me turn off the screen share. Let me turn off the recording and then we'll close with the Lord's Prayer. I'm in the wrong place. Let me see.